So welcome everybody to the Halifax Partnership's webinar on our newly launched Business Continuity Toolkit. So for those of you that aren't familiar with the Halifax Partnership, we are Halifax's economic development organization. We are a private-public partnership, completely arm's length of government. And we focus on a few things, but one of the areas that Hector and I's team focuses on is supporting the businesses in Halifax and helping them connect and grow in our community. We work with the Smart Business program, and if you're not familiar with that program, we're happy to connect with you one-on-one, learn more about your business, and help connect you to the resources that are available to overcome some of the challenges that you're facing with your business on a day-to-day basis. We're also happy to help assist or navigate you through this Business Continuity Toolkit. So if you find at the end, if you've got more questions or you'd like a little bit more in-depth explanation, please feel free to reach out to Hector or I or anybody here at the Halifax Partnership, and we can help navigate you through. Over the last 18 months or so, we've done intensive outreach to the business community, largely based based on the COVID-19 outbreak and our efforts to support businesses through this pandemic. And through that outreach, we've actually discovered that the businesses that were best able to respond to this business disruption were the ones that had invested the time in building a business continuity plan or a business resilience plan or some type of planning, or have thought through their business processes and how they were affected by or potential business disruptions. And it didn't mean that businesses got off scot-free and weren't affected at all, but it meant that they were able to respond as opposed to react, and that they were able to get to a recovery type phase or a mitigation phase much quicker. So that's what we're going to go through today, and actually as a result of that outreach, we partnered with KPMG to develop this toolkit that is designed to help small and medium-sized businesses through that process and thinking through their businesses or their business. The other thing of note is business continuity planning is not new. It's been around forever, and big, large corporations have this down pat. You can imagine Amazon has a playbook with every possible business disruption, worked out, and they've got scenarios and mitigation tactics in place to deal with practically anything. Small and medium-sized businesses don't have the time, the resources, the budget, the staff, everybody to have those teams in place to deal with business disruptions. That's what this toolkit is designed to kind of pare back all of that planning to a point where it's meaningful for a small and medium-sized business. And help them adapt. So one thing you'll find with the toolkit is that it is built for practically any business that we're speaking to. Some pieces may not be appropriate, and you may not have to go through every section. So keep that in mind as you're going through. All of the toolkit pieces, including all of the handbooks and the workbooks and everything, are all available on our website. So please visit the Halifax Partnership's website to download all of those tools for free. And I believe that's, or I've covered off all of the admin kind of functionalities here before we get going. So I'll turn it over to Hector, and he'll start the presentation.
Great. All right. Yeah, that's perfect, Jason. Thanks, Jason. And thanks everyone for joining. Good afternoon. Really appreciate you taking your time today to go through this with us. We'll just go quickly through the agenda. We're going to talk a little bit about what the Business Continuity Toolkit is, just briefly, and then why you should use the Business Continuity Toolkit. We'll go through some examples of disruptions, and then we're going to go into an overview of the toolkit itself. So yeah, perfect. So what is the Business Continuity Toolkit? Well, simply, it's really, the Halifax Partnership has developed a toolkit for small and medium-sized businesses to really help them plan for any type of disruption. The last year and a half has been challenging, no question about it. It's all we've really seen or talked about in the past year and a half, but really the pandemic was an eye opener, that disruptions can and do happen. But there are so many types of disruptions. So really, the pandemic is just the tip of the iceberg, really. And we know that running a business is extremely time consuming. It's very challenging. It's hard to find time to go through this process. But what the toolkit has been designed so that it's to guide you through the process at your own pace as you plan for change, potential opportunities, or disruption. Why should you use the Business Continuity Toolkit? We can never really be too prepared for change or the unexpected. It's designed for all types of disruption, like we mentioned, whether that be weather events, could be a flood, fire, could be an IT disruption, maybe a security breach, public relations issue, things like that. The list goes on, really. Planning at your pace now will help you recover more quickly, as understanding your processes and potential risks allows you to be prepared to respond as opposed to react when a disruption does occur. So some examples of disruptions, as I said, many types, but think Hurricane Juan for any of you that were in Halifax at that time. And shortly after, we had a huge snowstorm about, 2 or 3 months later. Both storms caused massive amounts of disruption throughout the city. More recently, Hurricane Dorian, which that alone caused some serious disruptions, but on a more localized event, if you recall, there was the crane collapse, which really disrupted businesses in a condensed area of the city, businesses and residents. Can't forget that. What if you can't access your facility? What if you have highly confidential, important documents that you no longer have access to? There could be downturns in business, but the opposite could occur too. There could be a surge in demand for your products or services. How will you keep up with that demand? Are you diversifying your suppliers in case of a supply chain disruption? If you may recall, a few months ago, there was the big container ship that was got stuck in the Suez Canal and caused a huge backlog. So think of all the businesses that were relying on those supplies and products. Maybe it's a rail disruption. We've experienced that in the past. So you can't get your product or your supplies. Do you have backup plans? So really, the list goes on with this as well as to what kinds of disruptions there are. It doesn't really matter what the disruption is. It's just the toolkit is designed to help you cope with that disruption and how it affects your business. Very quickly, this is just a quick overview of the toolkit. We'll go into much more detail in a moment here, but it's set up in a series of steps. These are all outlined on our website, as Jason mentioned, with the corresponding guides and workbooks. As you can see from this image, it's designed and intended to be circular, meaning that you will continue to go back to it periodically to make sure processes and resources haven't changed over time. Like you may have personnel changes. So if you've got somebody on staff that is responsible for a certain process and handling a disruption on that process, they may be all trained up, but then if they move on and you have a replacement, you have to go back and revisit this process to make sure that it's up to date. So really it starts with understanding your processes, just taking some time and going through all your processes, and then continues through different stages. You're going to do an impact analysis on if those specific processes are disrupted. You'll do a risk assessment. What's the likelihood or probability of a disruption happening? Understanding gaps in your processes. Then you're going to be developing a plan, then training and practicing that plan. So that it's like anything, it's important to go back and plan and practice it, right? So at this time, I'm going to turn it back over to Jason, and he's going to walk you through the toolkit in more detail. Thanks.
Thanks, Hector. So the first part of the planning process is really understanding your business, as Hector was saying. So identifying and understanding the key processes that run your business. In this stage, like Hector mentioned, the disruption itself is irrelevant. It could be a pandemic. It could be a zombie apocalypse. It could be anything. It really doesn't matter. But what will remain the same is the processes within your business and how that disruption is affecting those processes. So like I mentioned earlier, there's a series of workbooks on our website. This is what we're looking at right now is part of the first workbook. And some businesses may take more time going through this and understanding. Others may have this kind of figured out already in their heads, but this again is a tool to just kind of help you put it on paper and to help you kind of organize your thoughts. So in this particular example, now we've gone through the toolkit and we've filled it out as if we're a small furniture manufacturer. It's not, it's not by no means a complete example, but we've taken one particular, a very singular look at this business and applied it into the toolkit. So the first step that we've taken, or the first process that we've taken a look at within this business is staffing. Now, even within your processes, you may want to divide them up or take a look at different components, within the process. So staffing is one example. There could be manufacturing, there could be shipping and receiving, there could be, a countless number of processes within your business. But the idea is to try to map them out as best as you living list. So as you may want to revisit this to update it, just like any plan, really. So again, in this particular case, we've taken a look at the process of staffing, and we've divided it into three separate categories because we felt in this particular case that the staffing were unique enough, warranted their own kind of consideration. So we divided the staffing process into customer service staff, fulfillment staff, and accounting staff. The customer service staff are the folks that we need on the sales floor and staffing our cash registers. Warehouse staff are considered under fulfillment, and then we've got under accounting staff our admin folks there. We also have identified who is in charge of those particular processes. So we've identified names of staff members within organization that would oversee those functions. They could all be the same, and in some smaller businesses, they very well could all be the same. But in the event that they are different, it's good to understand who controls those. The next step that we've done is assessed the risk impact of this process on your business. To do this, we are using a impact scale that is provided in the workbook. It's a separate tab in the workbook, and it gives you some parameters to consider as you're assessing the risk on your business. Now, to be clear, these are all examples of the risk impact that may be relevant to your business, but it is by no means an exhaustive list, or it might not be applicable to every business. And for example, in this particular case, under financial loss, and we actually encourage businesses to think through these four broader buckets in terms of risk impact. So financial loss, operational disruption, reputation and stakeholder confidence, and legal liability and compliance. On financial loss, what we've outlined for this particular business is being an insignificant risk, or a risk rating of 1 would be, a financial loss of 2% or less than 2% of the organization's budget. In contrast, a catastrophic loss, so a rating of 5, would be a loss of over 20% of the annual budget. Depending on your business and your risk thresholds, those amounts may differ. So feel free to adjust these and customize them to your business needs and your risk tolerances. Same with operational disruptions. So in this case, we've said that from an operational disruption standpoint, an insignificant risk means that it's very limited impact, and specifically to internal non-critical activities. So customers are really not going to know, that there's any kind of an issue. Whereas catastrophic a risk category would be, full operational disruption, a large number of critical processes and customer services are impacted. So, again, up to you to determine what your risk thresholds are and how that would impact your business. Similar with a reputation or stakeholder confidence. Now, this can be especially true with stuff like social media management and those types of activities. So one might be, no adverse effects. It could be, a negative review or something that, will blow over in a couple of days or what have you. And again, I'm not saying negative reviews are not impactful, depending on your business and how you want to, or what your media plan is. You may want to be addressing those, but in some cases, it may be better to just kind of ignore them and let them go away on their own. Whereas a significant loss of public confidence or a media coverage or long-term impact to your business may be categorized as catastrophic for you. And again, from a legal liability standpoint, an insignificant risk impact would be, there's no legal breach or from a MOU standpoint or from any kind of a contract or contractual obligation, whereas, a catastrophic rating might be, you're planning to go to court. It's going to be a long, lengthy, and costly legal battle. So as you're kind of going through this, you're assessing that particular, or the impact of that particular business process and the risk scale that we've outlined here, assessing the risk impact to your business. So the reason why you're doing this is basically to help you, again, just understand your business, the processes that that your business is made up of, and to help you prioritize some of these processes in terms of developing mitigation strategies. So obviously, the bigger the number, the higher the risk that's going to be involved with that particular process. And those are the ones that you're going to want to take a closer look at first. And then you can work your way down. The other thing with this toolkit, it's meant to be used in manageable chunks. So you don't have to sit through or sit down and go through the entire thing in one sitting. You can slowly pick away at this. If you have any high risk areas, as we kind of go through, you'll understand some of the areas that you may want to consider working on first. And then, as you get those done, then there's less pressure and there's more time in theory for you to work on the rest of the mitigation factors for your business processes. So the second section is around the impact analysis and determining the resources you're going to need to put in place to help mitigate some of the impacts of these risk factors. So again, this is a separate workbook that we've developed and is available on the website. sorry, this is on the same workbook, and actually you'll find that the information for this particular one has been brought over from the last tab. So we've tried to make the workbooks as user-friendly as possible, and less, as little repetition as possible from your standpoint. If by means some of these formulas get messed up or it's not pulling from the right areas, in the future, you can always go and just download a fresh copy as well. So that's always available. There's always a copy on our website to kind of start fresh down the road. So now you're assessing the impact of those risks or the risks on those processes. So again, we've only got our 3 staffing processes outlined here. It would have carried over any other processes that we had, but again, for this example, those are the 3 we're focusing on. So now we're thinking through the number of staff that we use for that particular process during a normal business operation or normal business hours. And then thinking about the absolute minimum level of staffing you need for that particular, or to perform that particular function, for it to be viable for you to be able to deliver. So in this case, we've identified that for customer service staff, we typically have 4 staff available at all times, but the minimum number that we need to operate is 2. So we need 1 person at the cash and 1 person on the floor, theoretically. And then we're identifying where these people work. So in this case, they're working on the storefront, and we're thinking through if this work is is it possible to do this work remotely? In this case, it's not. We need people at the checkout. We need people in the store to help customers. Now, with our fulfillment staff, we have 2 people on staff at any given time, and the minimum number that we need to operate is 2. So, and they're both located in our warehouse. In this example, we assume the warehouse and the storeroom or the storefront are in the same building, and the office is maybe on the 2nd floor or within the same building as well, and just portioned off from the storefront. Now, the warehouse staff can maybe do some of their work at home. Maybe one of the individuals is able to do order processing from home, but we really do need 1 person in the warehouse at all times because they have to be there to accept products and to ship products out physically. For our accounting staff, we have 1. We absolutely need 1 because we need 1 person to keep our books in order and to cut our payroll checks. They work in the office, and their work, though, can be done from anywhere. So they can potentially work from home if that is a workaround for whatever the business disruption is. Then we want to take a look at our roles within our business that are vulnerable or critical in the sense that if they are unable to make it in, how can we keep going? So in this particular example, we have an accountant. We've only got 1. They're the only ones that understand our payroll function, and there's nobody else trained or equipped to handle that particular function. We don't have the option of outsourcing in this particular case, or we don't have it arranged. Maybe that's something that we can look at. Shift work is not applicable for this particular role. Remote work is possible, and that 1 person is a critical person with no trained backups. So it's really identifying those gaps in your HR. So if somebody gets sick with COVID, for example, and is not able to work for a prolonged period of time, or somebody retires even, and you don't have any backups or any kind of succession planning in place, what are you looking to do, and how are you going to cope with that? Next, you want to think through your equipment and machinery dependencies. So in this particular case, it's a POS system. So we've got 1 POS system It's set up by our cash. We minimum of one that we require. It operates our sales functions. And we don't have any backups, but maybe we can take cash or e-transfers. So again, we're just kind of thinking through this process. Continuing on this same spreadsheet, we're thinking about our facilities. So identifying all of our facilities. In some cases, it might only be one facility. In other cases, it might be different locations. So we have our storefront, our warehouse, and our office. We've outlined the processes performed at these facilities, so sales, customer service, receiving and fulfillment, and admin. And what's the workaround if that particular facility can't be accessed? So if a crane falls on top of it, if we have a flood, if there's a fire, if there's any kind of a disruption that prevents us from reaching that facility. So with the storefront, maybe we can pivot to online sales or curbside pickup if the issue is we just can't let people in the office or in the storefront, but we can still operate from it. Maybe we offer delivery or other types of mitigation strategies like that. From a warehouse standpoint, is there, can you outsource your fulfillment? So for example, there's organizations like DASK in Burnside that may be able to assist with some fulfillment functions, either short or long term. Maybe there's a temporary warehouse location that you've identified that you might be able to use to receive your goods or work out of short term, those types of things. From an office standpoint, maybe they can work from home or from a shared work location or from another location. If they can't access the physical office. From a technology system standpoint, you want to think of any type of software or equipment that you're using that you might not be able to access. So if it's like accounting software in this particular case that runs all of our payrolls, I'm thinking maybe like a Simply Accounting or some type of a software like that. In this case, it is a software as a service. What if your internet connection goes down, and it's not just your local connection, but it's province-wide for a week or for for a long term, or if that particular payroll system goes down, how are you going to perform your functions like payroll? Maybe in this case, it's manual payroll. So you've got a checkbook on hand. You haven't used it in 10 years, but it's there just in case you need to start cutting checks manually to your employees to pay them. Next, you want to think through your third-party dependencies. So these would be contractors or subcontractors that you're working with or you have relationships with. And in this case, we've identified the plow guy. We've included phone numbers and contact names in our plan here to make it as easy as possible to find or reach the right people in the event of an issue. We've identified as well, what function they serve and what's the nature of their service. So in this particular case, they're responsible for removing snow and ice. That's a fairly easy one for us to kind of understand and to wrap our minds around, and probably a fairly easy one for us to kind of mitigation tactic as well. So maybe we just have a backup on hand. Maybe we have a relationship with the Plow King. Maybe we just have them identified. We have their contacts, their name and number. But one of the things that we learned through this pandemic is that just having backup suppliers identified isn't necessarily good enough, because if the disruption is big enough, like a pandemic, for example, a lot of suppliers are busy servicing their existing client base, and they're not in a position to take on new clients or to be able to help you out, unfortunately. And because you don't have a relationship with them, it may not, you may not be able to get their attention. So, something to consider. Again, over the last 10 plus years, businesses have been working hard to streamline their supply chains and their third-party contacts, which all works well when there isn't a big disruption, but when there is, it can be very problematic. So again, having that diversification may be something you want to consider. Same with vital records. So, identifying what data or information that you have, where it's been stored, how it's been stored. So in this particular case, it's our accounting information. We have it in hard copies and banker boxes out back in the back room. So, that could be great. Nobody's going to hack into it, obviously, from a e-security standpoint. But if we have a flood and everything is soaked, that could be an issue, or a fire, or some type of other event. So how are we backing up those documents? Are we working with a third-party accountant, potentially, that maybe keeps those records on hand as well? How are we mitigating some of that information? And is it important enough, or is it a process that you're going to be concerned enough about to put a mitigation tactic in place? Same with your inventory and finished goods. So in this particular case, we sell dining tables and chairs and cushions. Cushions, by the way, is not misspelt. That's a brand name for cushions, of special cushions that this company sells. But for example, the dining tables, we've identified our minimum inventory levels that are required. So we have to have, or we want to have, a minimum of 6 dining tables on our show floor at any given point in time. And then we also understand, though, that the minimum required lead time to replace those tables is 12 weeks. So we need to understand how long it's going to take us to replenish our stock. Now, keep in mind, when you're going through this planning process, lead time may be different than in a crisis. So, for example, in pandemic times, at the early stage of this, lead times on products changed quite quickly. So it's important to understand that, as well as that this is your lead time when all is going well. If there are any disruptions in the supply chain, or if there's a spike in demand, like toilet paper, for example, it could be difficult to replenish your supply if there's a global shortage or a global demand spike for that particular product. So then, moving on to chairs, we understand we need 36, and the lead time required to replace those is 18 weeks. So that's a really long time. So we want to be watching those numbers quite closely to make sure that we can replenish with enough time. And if we see any changes happening either in the inventory levels or in demand, we want to be accommodating accordingly. Now, in this case, our cushions, our brand name cushions, we only need 12 of them, and they only take 2 weeks to produce. Maybe they're getting produced locally. We know the producer. We can drive over across town and pick them up when they're done. So there's less risk involved there potentially. So that is the end of that particular workbook. Next piece that we're going to do is we're going to take a look at the risk assess, or we're going to start to assess the risk on each one of these disruptions. Up to now, we kind of looked at the business processes. Now we're going to shift gears a little bit and look at the actual threats that could be affecting your business. So we've divided this into 4 main categories. So deliberate threats, accidental threats, natural disasters, and others. We pre-populated the form with some of the most common threats. And I apologize if this is all too small for you to see, don't worry, when you download the forms, you'll be able to view them much better, much clearer as well. So you'll be able to zoom in. But in this particular example, so under deliberate threats, we've chosen to fill in the cyber attack form or section. We've identified that the resource or the resources that would be affected in our business on a cyber attack would be the data or the sales systems. And our existing controls that we have in place is just our firewall or just our security systems that are in place. In this particular case, we feel that the systems that we have currently are moderate. They're not great, so there's room for improvement, but we're not completely vulnerable. So again, we've assigned a moderate scale there. Also, that reminds me, on all of these tabs, you'll see this little red triangle. When you're going through any of these spreadsheets, if you're not sure what to fill in, you can just hover over triangle and it will open up a little text box explaining what information we're looking for in that particular field. So those can help you as you're going through that. And then it's the exact same process that you would take a look at. So be it from an accidental threat. So the example here is a fire or an explosion. It would affect our storefront or our warefront. We have a monitored system and sprinklers, and we feel that that particular control that's in place is highly effective. So we're not too concerned about that particular one. And then you can keep going through this sheet. So that's the first part of this workbook. The second part is the part that we've got highlighted in yellow. So everything beyond here, so from this highlighted section and then all of these sections are all formulated cells. These particular cells, so you'll see that under the cyber attack, we are now thinking through the risk impact through the four lenses that we looked at earlier, but sorry, they're not the same as the ones we looked at earlier, but the risk impact to your business. So the business impact, the geographic extent, the damage to the business, and the recovery capabilities that you have currently. To answer this question, what you'll need to do is reference the risk assessment scale that's built into this toolkit. So it's similar to the one that we saw in the first workbook, similar in the sense that you're going to be assigning a rating of 1 through 5, again, 1 being insignificant through 5 being high, but you're looking at these 4 different lenses now. So the business impact, so for example, an insignificant impact, so there's very little effect on your processes at all, whereas a high impact affects all of your processes, and you're going to take, on this particular example, over 4 hours kind of to rectify them. Now, again, these time frames are very based on your risk tolerances and on your independent business. So feel free to adjust or tweak those to your business requirements. From a geographic extent, so you're looking at an incident that affects one particular sale or one particular site, to affecting a complete building, to affecting the local kind of region, to the community, to the whole city, to the entire province or country. So for example, with the pandemic, we would have a regional scale effect here. We would be assessing that as a 5. With damage, so similarly, so if you're looking at 1 rating, you're looking at damage that, very little impact on the equipment or your workers or employees, or under $10,000 in damages. All the way to catastrophic losses of, $500,000 and above. You're losing a whole building due to a fire or a flood or something along those lines. Again, the dollar figures in here are just for examples, not necessarily reflective to your business. In some cases, a $10,000 loss to a business could be catastrophic. So feel free to adjust that, to your business needs. And then the last piece that we're looking at is your recovery capability. So right now, how quickly can you recover from that particular incident? So is it a very quick recovery, so under 8 hours, or are you going to take, over a month to return back to normal? So could be fire or something that pushes you out of the building completely. Those types of things. We're going to come back and take a look at the probability when we look at the next step. So once you look through or think through this particular threat, so the cyber attack, you thought through the business impact. So in this case, we've assigned it a risk impact of 4 for the business impact. Geographic extent would only affect that particular terminal, so we've assigned it as a 1. Damage to your business would be a 3, and the recovery capabilities right now we feel is only a 2. So we've gone through these for all of the particular risk categories that we feel were applicable for our business. The other thing you'll notice, you can add in any particular threat that might be unique to your business. So feel free to add in. Next, we're going to take a look at the probability. So first we looked at, the risk, the impact of that particular risk on your business. Now we're looking at how likely is it to happen. So going back to, going back to this risk assessment scale, now looking at so in terms of likelihood, very unlikely. So first of all, it is probably not going to happen. Might happen in the next 5 years or so. All the way to a 5, which would be it's imminent. It's not a matter of if it'll happen, but it's when. So that could be within the next 1 to 3 months or so. Keep in mind these likelihoods could change as well as conditions change. And then your vulnerability to these risk impacts. So how will this, or how vulnerable are you? So a 1 could be, you've got efficient controls in place. You're fairly confident that it's not going to happen or not going to have much of an impact to you. All the way to, you've got no plans. There's no mitigation structures in place at all, and you're very, very vulnerable to this particular incident happening. So again, you would assign this 1 5 rating in these columns. In this particular case, we've assigned 1 to a likelihood for a cyber attack and a vulnerability of 4. So the likelihood is fairly low, but the vulnerability, you're fairly high because don't feel your mitigation strategies are very good at the moment. In contrast, your fire suppression scenario. So in this case, you think the likelihood is fairly low, but your vulnerability is also very low because you've got confidence in your monitored system and your sprinkler system. And again, just because you have a sprinkler system doesn't mean that you aren't vulnerable. But in this particular case, this business owner felt that wasn't the appropriate rating for them. So again, as I mentioned, all of these fields, you can only enter a numeric value between 1 and 5, and it's a little drop-down menu for all of those. And once you've completed all of these, the rest of the formulas all happen automatically. So first part of this calculates your risk impact. And it's not rocket science. All this column is doing is taking a look at your risk impact and picking the highest value of these 4 columns. So in this particular case, we've got a 4 in business impact, and that's what it's capturing. With the risk probability, it's also taking a look at your 2 respective columns and picking the highest number in that particular, in those 2 columns. The next column, which calculates your residual risk or your risk rating, simply multiplying these 2 columns to give you your risk rating. And then the final risk level is assigned using the following matrix that is, again, given in a separate tab in the workbooks that we provided. You don't have to actually use this tab for anything, but we want to provide it for reference for you to understand how the risk rating has been assigned. So for example, if you had a 5 impact and a 5 probability, is bringing it into this quadrant of the matrix, which is assigning that high level of risk. Alternatively, if you had a 2 impact and a 1 probability, you're going to be in the low quadrant of the matrix. So again, the reason why you want to be looking at these numbers and paying attention to them is, the bigger the number, the more urgent it is for you to put together some type of mitigation strategy for that, business disruption or that risk. So again, all there to kind of help you think through your business and the planning process. There we go. So the next part is around building your continuity strategy. So you've identified your processes, then you've identified the risks to those processes. Now you're building the continuity plan and to fill in the gaps in the response plans that you've got. So thinking through is similar, and this is again a third workbook that we've provided. You've got your process names that you've identified previously. So again, the number of staff, as usual, number of staff that you need at a minimum level. But here now we're calculating percentage of utilization. So whether or not there's any wiggle room within your existing infrastructure. So in this case, with our customer service staff, we've got 4, we need 2, we got some wiggle room there. We're only using 50% of our capacity, our requirement capacity. Whereas with fulfillment and accounting, we're using 100% of that capacity, so there's no wiggle room. So if there's any business disruptions there, or if somebody leaves unexpectedly or can't make it into work or what have you, that could be affecting your business immediately. Similarly with the people dependencies, so you'll notice that we've tried to keep things in the same kind of order. So as you're thinking through the mitigation strategies now, you're thinking through the same processes or the same way you did earlier on. So people dependencies, we've identified that Jane is our accountant. She controls payroll, and there's no job aids or any kind of guides for her critical activities right now. So, it's okay to identify that, but that's a big flag where we should be considering, job shadowing, or maybe there's an opportunity to have an outsourced provider fill in the event that Jane can't make it in for a prolonged period of time. Maybe there's, workarounds internally, additional training required, what have you. And again, not necessarily accounting. In our last workshop, we had a company that had, they were a metalworking shop, but they had one person who could operate their metal lathe. And if they retired or couldn't make it into work, they were out of luck. There was no way for them, like nobody else could use that particular piece of equipment. So it's understanding the roles within your organization and which ones don't have backups. And maybe it's as simple as cross-training. Maybe it's looking at other particular alternatives. So in the businesses, in the metalworking case, I think they're going to be looking at partnerships with, another business, not necessarily a competitor, but somebody that they can collaborate with in the event that something happens, and they can share work back and forth. Same with equipment dependencies. So in this case, we talked about the POS system. We only had one. There are no spares available. For this particular piece of equipment, we do have a priority supplier arrangement signed with our financial institution, but it still could get or take 24 to 48 hours for a new machine to arrive if it went down. So what is a manual workaround for this particular device? Well, we could take cash, obviously, or we could take e-transfers. But e-transfers can work if it's just the POS system that's down. What if it's the internet or it's an issue with the internet, and that's why the POS system is down? So being able to accept e-transfers might be a workaround. But in that case, you may want to have the ability to check on or to receive those e-transfers. So do you have a cell phone with satellite, or cellular capabilities that you've got the email set up to receive the e-transfers from? Do you have automatic acceptance on your e-transfers already signed up or put onto your account? Those types of things, just to streamline the process. I know of businesses that have a cell on hand for that particular scenario. Is it worth the cost? Again, I can't tell you yes or no, but it would depend on again, your risk tolerance and whether that's an appropriate kind of a mitigation strategy. Next, we want to think through our technology dependencies. So, for example, in this case, we're completely dependent on our e-commerce platform. So that's the platform we use to power our online store. We've identified that we want a one-day kind of recovery. So we feel that if the store is down longer than 1 day, it's going to start really having long-term effects for us. Our current capabilities, will only allow us to recover in about a week. So that might be our service level agreement that we have with our e-commerce platform. Obviously, there's a big gap here in between what our requirements are and what our capabilities are. And then we want to think, how can we mitigate that? So we could train staff in-house to do some of those kind of emergency updates or whatever needs to be done to the website just to get it standing up again. Maybe it's reworking our service level agreement with our renegotiating our service agreement with the platform we're using, what have you. In this case, we chose to train our staff to do it for us internally. And then the third-party dependencies. So the plow guy, we've got, has come back here. We do have an agreement with them, so we have a contract, and they have agreed to align to our business recovery requirements, so they understand our needs and what we're talking about there. There is a contractual obligation on their part to, in this case, it could be clearing our driveway within 6 hours of a storm ending, or 2 hours of it starting, or depending on how you've worded or agreed to your contract. We do also have a third party identified in this particular case, so probably less mitigation that we have to do here. But for our chair wholesalers or our chair supply, that could be an issue. So we don't have, or they're not, we just put in an order with our chair manufacturer. We agree to buy 100 chairs, they ship us 100 chairs. We have no other relationship with them, no other contracts with them. There's no contractual agreements, and we don't have any third parties identified. So if all of a sudden they can't accept our order, what are we doing? How is that going to affect our supply chain and our inventory levels? Do we have backups identified, or could we identify backups? Maybe there's alternative products, man. Well, we go to futons instead of chairs, or I don't know, whatever the scenario is. As we continue down this spreadsheet, and this is one spreadsheet. It was too big to fit on one screen. We think through our vital records. So again, the client lists. Do we have spare copies of this or backups? Are they stored on the cloud somewheres? Do we have a hard copy? And knowing where they are is also good, and who has access to them. So, and then inventory. So similarly, you want to think through your dining chair. So again, the minimum requirement, if there's spare inventory. So let's say you had 2 or 3 different storefronts and you could move inventory around. In this case, it's not applicable. And then where can we find additional stock? So in this case, the dining tables come from Furniture R Us. It's a domestic supplier. You may want to have phone numbers and contacts and all of that in here as well, so that you're able to source those or to access that information if you need it quickly. With our chairs, we're saying that they're imported from a foreign manufacturer. So that's why the lead time earlier was so long. So it takes a long time for these to get in. So again, what are our mitigation strategies around that? Are we going to source maybe, or take a look at some suppliers locally, or nearshore, or find some way to replace that? And same with the cushions. They're a local supplier. Capacities is there. We know they're available. They're fairly local. So we can go and pick those up anytime. And then the last part that isn't really part of the Business Continuity Toolkit, but we wanted business to think through this piece, was the revenue stream. So are you fairly dependent on one or a very small group of products or customers? So in this case, 75% of our sales is from furniture, only 25% is from cushions. So if all of a sudden we weren't able to get furniture anymore, what would happen? Are we looking to diversify? Are we looking to act or to buy stock elsewhere? What have you? Same with if you've got one big customer. In this case, we've got Acme Staging that buys 80% of our stuff. If they were to go out of business or to stop buying from us, what does that mean? Do we need to diversify our client list? I worked with a business in the past that had one client. Mainly 95% of their sales came from one client. And it was a big mine. The mine then announced that they were closing in 18 months. Now, luckily for this particular business, they had that lead time to diversify their client base. So by the time the business closed, or the mines closed, they were able to diversify their client list so that the mines made up 5 to 10% of their sales, as opposed to 95%. So it still hurt them, but it didn't kill them. So understanding those things and your business, your revenue streams to your business is also quite important. Once you go through all of that, then you can start thinking about prevention. So you've identified your risk gaps. So in this case, your people shortages, the risk levels and the impacted resources. Then you start plugging in some of your solutions. So again, it's thinking through these things. And like Hector mentioned earlier on, it's about understanding the processes in your business, the disruptions on them, and then how you might mitigate those, so that when that comes to place, you're not wasting your time panicking and trying to figure all of that out in the moment. You've got it kind of worked through, and hopefully you can, like I said, respond to the business disruption much better than had you just been faced with it immediately. So same with your equipment shortages, your third-party failures, inventory shortages, or any other risk assessment that you want to add in there. It's also important to think through the cost to remediate some of these things. So sometimes the cost is going to just be prohibitive. So there is a way to remediate or to mitigate that particular risk, but cost is more than it's worth. So it might, you might decide that you're okay with absorbing that risk if that particular disruption happens. And then the timeline to remediate. So how long is it going to take you to get back to a normal operating kind of a framework? So is it going to be fairly quickly, or is it going to take, days, months, or weeks to get back to normal? We also provided a tab to help you with a response phase. So this is when the crisis is actually happening, and to plan for that. So we've got, for example, the cyber attack and IT disruption, all of your disruptive events listed here. And again, it's not a complete list. You can add on whatever you want. These are just examples. And then outlining your current response capabilities and plans. So for example, with a cyber attack, you've got your cybersecurity incident response plan, and so on and so forth. So all of these plans that you have in place, or mitigation strategies, and then additional required preparation that you have to do to be prepared for these types of scenarios. So in this case, for the cyber attack, you're going to, you want to build a scenario specific playbook. So if, I'm a victim of ransomware, what are you going to do? And you're going to use that particular playbook to help you guide through your thought or your decision-making process. Finally, we've got a recovery tool to help you. So this is post-response. So arguably with COVID-19, a lot of us are in the recovery stage now, where we're starting to kind of hopefully start building that capacity back up. I know with the tourism industry, specifically the hotel industry is there right now. Their biggest issue is staffing and trying to find the people they need to run their facilities. So they've got lots of capacity. They've got more than enough people booking rooms, but their issue is, for example, cleaning the rooms so that they're ready for guests. They just don't have enough people. And that's just an example. So again, thinking through the people that you need, the equipment, the technologies, the third parties, all of those things, resources you'll need to put or assign to help with the recovery and how you're going to scale up or ramp up your productions. And then, your recovery approach if the resource is disrupted. So how are you going to plan around that? Again, referring back to what Hector said, this could all be applied to a really positive thing as well. So during COVID, we had businesses that, saw some really big wins. They had landed a big contract, and it was unfortunate for them that they were doing it during COVID time, but they were trying to hire and they couldn't find enough people to hire, or they couldn't house enough people within their facilities anymore to deal with the contracts that they were looking to do. So, or looking to service. So how can they help plan to ramp up those the services or that they're providing? Finally, is now taking all of that and putting it into your plan. So we provided some toolkits or plan examples, I should say, on our website. They're all available for downloads, including the Continuity Plan Development Guide, which helps walk you through all of the information that we just went through, and specific template examples. So we have an emergency response template, a crisis management plan, business continuity plan, IT discovery or recovery plan, and we even have a return to work checklist, which is really designed more for a pandemic type of environment, but can be applicable for anything. So maybe it's a flood or a fire and you're looking to bring people back into the workplace, and those types of things. Then finally, it's exercising and testing your plan. And quite honestly, if you're a business and you've gone through all of these stages and you don't do the planning or the exercising or the training, you know, I'm still going to be happy with the progress that you're doing, or and the preparation that you've done. The planning is actually, you know, one of the best ways to help keep your tool refreshed and make sure that everybody in your organization understands and helps you run scenarios through your business. And we provided some scenarios to help you kind of test your plan. But if you don't do this step, it probably won't be the end of the world either. But this is really, you know, we highly recommend it because it helps you, you know, build that level of comfort and that trust in the plan. The last thing I'm going to mention is on the website, you'll notice that we have two versions of our workbooks. So we have our simplified workbook and our in-depth workbook. The in-depth workbook, the only real difference there is that you go through all of these components that we just went through, but you break it down over time. So what is that impact to your business, you know, in an hour, in a couple of hours, in 4 hours, in 8 hours, in a day, you know, over a couple of days, over a week, over a month. So you're breaking it down to minute time increments. And that's the biggest difference between the two. For 99% of the businesses that we work with, small and medium-sized businesses, the simplified toolkit is going to be the preferred tool. And, you know, understanding that if the time parameters change on a particular incident, businesses are going to have to adapt. But you probably don't need to go through the exercise and plan to that level ahead of time. It's probably going to affect your business in a very similar way. For larger businesses that are running like auto manufacturers or data centers where hours and minutes are critical, they're going to want to take a look at you know, breaking down those timelines in a very fine kind of way. So that's the end of our toolkit presentation and our workshop. Hope you enjoyed it. I guess we'll take a look and see if there are any questions in the chat function that we can help answer.
Yeah, Jason, I did answer. There was a couple questions. Just one with regards to definitive definition of small or medium company in Nova Scotia and what makes it fall under that category. I took a stab at it, but if you want to mention, Jason, what?
Sure, and so, and I see, Hector, you've answered the kind of the definition category of it. The toolkit is really designed for, you know, small and medium-sized businesses. So under, you know, 20, 30 employees. With that being said, you know, it can be equally as useful to larger employers over 100 plus. Again, depending on the structure, you know, what they do, they can apply all of this. So the tool itself is very adaptable to the type of business or the size of business that you have.
Yeah, and just what business continuity best practice is this toolkit adopting?
So business continuity planning. So helping to mitigate against business disruptions is what we're looking at for this particular toolkit. So thank you very much. Like I mentioned earlier, if you have any questions or if you need help or kind of navigating through the toolkit, feel free to reach out to Hector or myself or anybody here at the Halifax Partnership. We're always available to help businesses one-on-one and connect you to the resources to help you, overcome other challenges as well. So thank you very much. Have a great day.
Thanks, everyone.